On the last lap, I was like, emergency poop break, Ben. Ben was like, you got it. You pull over to a bush, I'll be right up here. I was like, thank you so much.
You got to do what you got to do. It's just, I always carry wipes in my ruck just for that reason. It's like I've learned the hard way. It's just,
oh, yeah. Hello, and welcome to Runnah, running on Cape Cod, Massachusetts and beyond. I'm Juliana, your host. Welcome back, friends. And this week, we have a very special guest, someone who I think everyone is going to find his story very interesting. We have Matt Carroll. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you.
Happy to be here. It's an honor.
I don't know if it's an honor, but happy to have you. And I think that people are really going to resonate with your story. I'm interested to hear the specifics of your story because I know just like a general, very light overview of kind of who you are on the running side and also the non-running side. So I think this will be a fun and hopefully heartfelt and hopefully, I was going to say connecting, but intriguing, I guess, story for people to hear, because I'm well aware that you have a pretty extensive history, both working. Do you use the Army? Is it the Army?
Navy. I was
the
in
Navy.
Navy and the Merchant Marine.
Navy and Marine. Okay, and thank you for your service too.
Thank you.
And just how running has played into that. So let's start from the beginning. Where does the Matt origin story start for running? What is the first time we either ran or considered running ever?
So that's the interesting part. My first race was a 200-mile race.
Wow, really just going out the gate hard, aren't we?
So if we backtrack, my story is in line, my running career, if you want to call it that for lack of a better term.
We'll call it a career.
Is
still working in it.
Yeah, is aligned with my sobriety. So if we go back, I fought a 30-year battle with alcoholism.
Yeah.
That came to a head finally in 2018. But
okay.
Prior to that, in 2016, I lost my dad to suicide as direct results of alcoholism and mental health issues.
Is that something that just runs in your, tends to be a common theme in your family?
So to that point, 14 months later, my brother did the same thing for the same reasons.
That's terrible.
So,
I'm sorry.
I was already, my alcoholism was already, entrenched in me. It was bad.
Raging.
And then, as you can imagine, like any good alcoholic, I used that as an excuse to just make it worse.
Yeah.
Rather than deal with the issues, I just kept trying to drink all the emotions away. Roughly 14 months after my brother's suicide, I found myself walking into a local detox here in Falmouth.
Oh, okay. Did you grow up in Falmouth? Or?
No, I grew up in a split family. So my mother is still in North Attleboro, and my dad and my stepmom were in Norfolk, Mass.
So how did you land in Falmouth? Because neither of those places are Falmouth.
So
or really super close either.
That's another long story. But so I ended up buying. I was a merchant marine. Coming out of Mass Maritime, I was a merchant marine.
Okay.
I was looking at houses here in Falmouth, and a good friend of mine had 3 children and was looking to upgrade his house. So I bought his house off of him because I already knew it. And
hey, just buying a house, just casual. Probably a lot more approachable, when you actually bought the house than it is now in the current housing market. But
Well, that was 21 years ago. So
yeah,
it was a little
bit less crazy.
Financially, it was just starting to climb up, but I got it at the right time. So yeah, I bought the house initially as it was going to be an investment property or a flip, and here we are 21 years later, and I'm still in the same house. So that plan didn't work quite as the way I expected it to. But
we're glad that you stuck around.
Yeah, no, I've come to love Falmouth. It's just it's like I say, 21 years later, it's been great, and
it's a good community here.
And it all kind of coincides with the what happened with me. So I prior to going into detox, I've been involved in several local veteran organizations.
Okay.
One of the things we do is coming up here in June, I help organize a fishing trip here in Falmouth for wounded combat veterans, along with Spaulding Rehab and Cape Cod Veterans, Inc.
Nice.
So in during one of those or several of those events, this is our 13th year doing it.
Wow, that's a lot of years.
One of the gentlemen I met through that has a service dog, and I watched that dog take that gentleman from somebody that literally had a gun in his mouth to somebody that turned around and became an active father, an active husband, an active member helping other veterans.
That's powerful.
So after I got out of detox, during my time in detox, I met several other veterans that were in there with me, mostly combat veterans that were battling PTSD and addiction at the same time. Addiction due to PTSD.
Yeah.
Coming out of there about 2 months after I left there, we lost one of those gentlemen just to an intentional overdose that was a suicide. Around that same time, I decided, like most people that go into sobriety after a long length of time, I was about 60 pounds heavier than I am now. I said, I'm going to start running, start losing weight, going to the gym. And at the same time, I also made a decision that I need to do more for the veteran community other than just fishing. I've been fishing my whole life. It's a no-brainer for me to go fishing, taking people fishing. So around that time frame, I started running. I couldn't run maybe more than a mile, maybe 2 miles at most.
Yeah.
I saw an ad for an informational session for this thing called Ruck for Hit. No idea what it was, just said it was honoring veterans, doing veterans. And the one thing I looked at was on their website was at the time, essentially they were doing a lot of money and funds towards service dogs. So I had my friend that I just watched, come from a shell of himself to a active member of society.
Full human.
Because of this dog.
Yeah. Animals are powerful.
So I went to this informational session. The woman that ran it, she could sell ice cubes to an Eskimo. And I said, I can only run about maybe a mile or two right now. She's like, you get 5 months to train, you'll be fine. I'll help you train. So.
Was that someone who's still with the organization right now?
She is. She's still involved with it.
You want to shout her out or no?
Oh, that's Nicole Spencer.
Oh, it's Nicole Spencer.
Okay. She is moving on, but she's still actively involved at this time.
Yeah, feel free to name drop anyone who's
okay, I wasn't sure, so
no, go for it.
That's fine. So
we just do. The only rule is we don't shit talk anyone here.
No shit talking, especially Nicole. So so I got involved with the Ruck for Hit. I got involved with Heroes in Transition, who runs the Ruck for Hit, and it worked. The timing was perfect. It got me involved with good, healthy people, which I needed. I was early in sobriety.
Yeah.
I needed to. One thing about sobriety is, in order to be successful is you have to walk away, you have to change the person that walked into that room. It's not just about, everybody thinks it's just about taking the drink away or the drugs away. That's only a very small portion of how recovery is successful.
Oh yeah, and community is obviously extremely important.
Huge. So I started actively training with these people, running, got to know a lot of people in the running community locally. And it became a really core part of my recovery. Unbeknownst to me, it happened by accident. I was still doing, going to meetings. I was highly active in AA, which I still am. But I noticed that, I was going to places like WellStrong where they have a sober running club. I would do that once or twice a week. Other local clubs that may not necessarily be sober clubs, but they were healthy people they were watching out for me. We trained, and I want to say it was the second or third training run for the Ruck for Hit on a Saturday morning. And we got done with the training run, and I was talking to Nicole Spencer, and one of the things she'll often say to people is, what's your reasoning for being involved in this?
Yeah, what's your why?
And I said, well, I got this friend of mine, Don, that, his dog literally saved his life.
Yeah.
And you guys, one of your biggest things is service dogs. And she looked at me with a huge smile on her face and tears just coming out of her eyes. And she's like, we gave him that dog. We paid for that dog.
Oh my God, really?
I had no idea.
Oh, wow.
I had no idea it was, so it's, one of those things in life where you're like,
And she probably didn't realize how much of an impact that had been. Because a lot of times with I know with charity programs especially, you will phrase the funds for whatever the goal is, and then you kind of just send them off. And then whatever happens with the person that you send the funds to, half the time you don't hear back from them at all. And I'm imagining that's kind of what happened, something along those similar lines where they knew he got the dog, but didn't know the full impact of what the dog had done, potentially?
They do to a certain extent. They stay active with the people when they get dogs in that situation. Not is in the beginning they're very active and close. As it, and as time goes on, they try and bring them back and make sure they keep an eye on them. That gentleman just got a second dog because that dog Nick that I've known is now 9.5, almost 10 years old. So he's been retired. He's at the end of his service dog career.
Yeah, he gets to hang out at the doggy
now
retirement home.
he's retired and he's helped training the new dog, which is great. But I guess for me, I watched it literally save somebody's life.
Yeah.
When I don't say that lightly. I have when we're raising money for the Ruck for Hit, I have an email from him that details the night before he got the dog when he literally had a gun in his mouth, and the only reason he didn't pull the trigger is because he knew he was getting the dog the next day, and he had tried everything under the sun to try and get corrected, and it just didn't work. But the service dog worked. Now like Heroes, their big thing is equestrian. Very very similar type situation where the horses take that partnership as a service partner and help heal. It's one of the most successful PTSD treatments is not only service dogs but equestrian therapy.
I would have never guessed, specifically the horses. I would have never guessed that. I mean, as someone, I love riding horses, so I totally get it too. And horses are so intuitive as well, and they're good, generally speaking, good communicators, I would say, when it comes to
So they're very, very. My daughter rides. I have a lot of friends that ride and family that ride. The horses are so in tuned to the person that's riding with them, and it's even a lot of those programs, they might go 2-3 days before they actually ride. They spend the first couple of days learning how to saddle the horse, how to clean the horse, how to earn the trust between the horse, and then once they earn that trust, they realize, and they start riding with that horse, and they realize that just turning your head is enough to alert the horse, or movement, or your body language is huge on a horse. It's way more than a dog. The dogs gain it more from time being around you. With a horse, they have an instant connection. I mean, I've done some riding myself with the horses, and it's amazing. I watched what it did for my daughter. I watched what it did for other friends of mine with PTSD. And it's amazing. From a running standpoint, it's I got to watch that money we raised get used for those things
and help other people out.
I ran that first ruck. So I got sober in September of 2018, late September of 2018. I ran my first race, which was the end of April in 2019, which was a 210 mile race. I think I had 30 something miles of that was my portion of it. It's a relay style race. And then I want to say it was 3 weeks or a month later, I ran my first 5K. So that
feels a little bit like maybe in reverse of what most people normally do, but I stand behind it. I don't
it's
think
worked.
Especially since you obviously were putting in the correct training. You had people who were helping you and preparing you and all these things. It's not like you just went out and did it by yourself and then just kind of were like, oh, you trained. You actually trained.
Oh, I trained hard. I wouldn't recommend doing that portion of it. I would recommend starting out with a 5K and working your way up.
Probably a smart idea.
Yeah, it would have been the smarter idea. But as you talk to people in recovery that run a lot, you'll see it's a pretty common theme. The endurance type races are a pretty common theme.
Yeah.
For me, anyways, it's worked for my personality. I've done a lot of the Ruck for Hits. I've done a lot of the Ragnars. I've done Marine Corps Marathon now.
Yeah.
I still love doing 5Ks and 10Ks, you know what I mean, and some of the smaller races. It's more that for me, running has become more a part of my, not just my recovery, it's been part of my life where it just kind of helps keep me centered. I enjoy the training aspect of it for the longer races.
Yep.
It works. I found it works for my personality,
Yeah.
I find that a lot of people, because I have a lot of chronic illnesses, and I'll count PTSD also as a chronic illness as well too. And anyone who deals with any kind of chronic condition or illness, I feel like is prime material for long distance running because we know pain And like, even when I've been training for my ultra, like, I'm like, you have to really, you think you're going to put me in more pain than my body has already put me in. Try again. And like, it works from a mental standpoint too. It's like, you're so used to being in a state of just like heightened pain and panic and all these other things that one, the running like lets you release a little bit of that. And two, it's kind of hard for it to reach that level of just like mental angst and anguish that you have in your brain already. And it just gives you perspective as well to just be like, oh, okay, like there are other ways I can get rid of and like disperse and express, I guess, like the internal emotions and anxieties I have in my head.
I think for me, I spent 30 years of my life as an active alcoholic, and I was always in that just craziness role of just my back was out, and I put it there myself.
Yeah.
Putting my back against the wall, whether it was financially, whether it was in relationships and marriage and everything else, that my body was so used to having its back against the wall that it just thrived in that, in that chaos.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I still enjoy about the endurance races is you're in a van for 30 hours and you just focus on that next leg. You focus on, doing the best you can. You're going through the pain. That pain just kind of, it's
almost comforting in a weird way.
I was just going to say it is. There's excellent wording. It is comforting in a crazy way. You thrive in that pain. You get used to it. It pushes you. It motivates you.
I understand this.
But at the same time, I think now that I've done a lot of these, I have to start also looking at you start looking at yourself, questioning. It's like, why am I still doing this? Is it, I enjoy it, yes. You have to make that. At some point you have to stand back and be like, okay, is this
hurting me or helping me?
Exactly. Am I doing more harm than good?
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that going here forward after this last race that I have to kind of look at. Like, do I start scaling back and look at other type races?
Yeah.
I love the aspect of raising money, but there's obviously other ways to do that as well.
Well, I think too, you compared it to when you were like in the heightened state of your alcoholism, where your back is just against the wall constantly, but you're putting yourself. Not only are you physically and mentally like with your back against the wall, you've got everything else around you churning in a negative direction. So I feel like when you started running, it sounds like it kind of started churning it in a positive direction. Like, you physically and mentally, for the purpose of your training, have your back against the wall, but you gained a really supportive community around you. You gained more physical fitness. You gained more mental clarity. Like, it sounds like to me, you kind of almost reversed the toilet bowl spin. And though the spin is still happening, it's a positive spin instead of a negative spin.
Yeah, you basically, and this happens a lot with people, is they trade in an unhealthy addiction for a healthy addiction. And that's essentially what it becomes. It is what it is. Let's call it what it is.
Let's be real here. Let's like 90% of runners are
100%. That's why I say let's be real. It's what it is, an addiction.
Yeah.
It's a healthy one.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you one thing that I learned early on was, because I had no choice, I was trying to lose weight, and I had to lose a significant amount of weight in a really short period of time while I was training, was I never...
You have a different backpack weight?
Even back then it was just because I knew to be able to finish. So the first year I did it, so the way the Ruck for Hit works is if you're over 160 pounds, currently you run with 20 pounds of weight on you. If you're under 160, you run with 10. Back then it was 30 and 20. So I was running with 30 pounds regardless, because I was not going to get under 160 pounds at that point. There was no way I was going to do that.
Yeah, that was completely unrealistic.
I started my running, I was like just shy of 200. I was like 209 pounds at not quite 5'9". I was clinically obese. That was what it was. I forget what I actually ran at that point. But I knew I needed to get my entire body was just, I had been just putting poison after,
Sounds like you were probably like a little bit more blob-like than you were anything
I was
else.
blob. I was just, it was a lot of things going against it, and it was just trying to change a lot at once.
Yeah, not as much muscle mass as you probably would have liked.
Oh, no, it was it was just trying to make a significant change. Again, I wouldn't recommend it for anybody. It's one thing. It's one thing to go do a 5K, which I would recommend if you're in a situation like that.
Yeah.
Start out with a 5K. I mean, I was doing 5Ks in training, but I wasn't. We weren't doing races. It was geared towards doing a 30+ hour endurance race.
Yeah, it's like me. Like I just did 2 races this spring. The first one was a full marathon, which was a training run for me. Would not recommend that your first long training run be a full marathon. Don't do that.
Yes.
I've been running marathons since 2018. Don't do that, okay? But it's kind of like that, where it's like if someone's just like, I'm just gonna go run a marathon as a training run. It's like, no.
Shouldn't even during a marathon, you should never get up to that distance.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just, I mean, I just ran an ultra marathon, so
That's different.
It's a little bit different. The pacing is different. The terrain is different.
Yes.
It's all good. But yeah, it's something that it sounds like maybe we should start a little bit slower. But again, you had the correct people around you too.
I did. I had a running coach. I had a nutritionist. I had all the right people helping me. And that's one thing that, I don't think enough runners talk about is, I had a nutritionist, and once I got my nutrition down, the significant difference that made in my life is people don't talk about that enough. I was trying to lose weight, but at the same time, she was a runner herself, so she knew, you need to fuel properly here.
You need sufficient carbohydrates.
Anybody can sit there and just shut off the sieve and lose weight, but if you're trying to train at the same time, you have to be really careful. And I had people around me that had run marathons. I had people around me that had done plenty of these endurance races.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's the other thing too, is people get into running and they just say, I'm just going to go out and run, which is great, but
you can't do that for a certain amount. Like if you're running under an hour, go ahead, just go out and run. So you'll probably be okay for the most part, unless it's like swelteringly hot.
But if you choose to do, whether it's a marathon, whether it's an endurance race, whether it's there's reasons there's training programs out there for certain races.
Yeah.
Because you can get hurt. I watched a lot of people get hurt where they try and ramp up weight. They jump into these big races at the very end and they try and ramp up their training too fast. And then next thing, including myself, I've done it. I did it this year. I tried to ramp up at a certain point and I had a hamstring issue. Then it just happens. So you have to be. And I've been doing this for a while now. I just injuries happen.
I mean, even if you are being careful, injuries happen anyway too.
100%.
So it's just. It's super individualized to whatever distance you're doing, also whatever training you have done in the past, and then also your body too. Because with my weird chronic illnesses too, I'll just randomly pull a muscle, and it just happens. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's what we're doing today, But I know that about myself, and I have coping strategies for that. And I have an acupuncturist and a massage therapist and things like that. And I liked your mention of having a team around you, a team of people.
Yeah, I mean, and you gotta, sometimes you got to pick and choose. I have my chiropractor I go see almost once a week. And that took a couple people to try out. Nutritionist, I've gone through a couple different ones. People have just moved on. And it depends on what you're doing in life too. Some people are geared towards certain things. It just
depends what your body needs too. For some people, they respond really well to say chiropractic work or massage or acupuncture or cupping or something like that. And some people, it just either does nothing or they have a negative side effect from it. And you just kind of have to know your own body and know what works for you personally.
And I've been doing this. So this was my 7th year doing the Ruck for HIT. And I've helped run the training for the last 3 or 4 years, and we slowly integrated a lot more of cross-training type stuff, and we work with, I see you got the Fit Plan shirt on. I mean, we work with Fit.
I did. I came in and I did the nutrition session for you guys.
Yeah, you did the nutrition thing, which we greatly appreciated.
Yeah, it was great. You got a good group.
I get a lot out of it. That's why I shout out to you on that. I mean, it's just, I use some of that stuff during the event.
Okay.
No, we do.
That was helpful.
A lot of us take notes, and
everyone seemed very diligent when I was there, very respectful, which is honestly par for the course for any thing that involves service members that I've ever been a part of. And I worked at the VA for a little bit too, and everyone is just the level of respect that comes from anyone who's involved with any kind of service is top notch.
I mean, we have a good mix of active duty, veteran, and supporters. And and you can't get. I say this when I talk to certain groups. And I've had people do this. You're in a crowd of like 50 people, and it's like you say, all right, who has a spouse that's military? Who's got a parent that's military? And you can be in a room full of 1,000 people, and if you go 3 or 4 steps back, who's got a cousin? Everybody in the room's gonna have their hand raised.
Yep.
I mean, you can't. This country is so tied to our military. It's
wild.
But you also get a lot of people, especially that have been out of the service for a while. You see we get a lot of people that get involved in these runs, and not just the other runs that are 5, 6, maybe even 10 years out of the military, and they're out of shape and they want to get back into shape, and they get involved in these running clubs. They get involved in the cross training of it. They have some specific cross training programs set up just for these type people that they've been out for a while. They're not looking to become Arnold Schwarzenegger. They just want to get back into shape, and they want to be proud of themselves.
I always joke when I go to the grocery store, because I like bringing my groceries up in like 2 or 3 bags, and the cashier is always like, "You sure it's just in 2 bags?" I was like, "This is what we go to the gym for." So that way we can have functional fitness, my friends. So that way we can bring the groceries up in one trip. This is why we are lifting weights at the gym.
No, and it's funny you bring that up. That's a point I always try to make when,
you can bring the laundry up the stairs in one go, because like you went to the gym and you did the stair stepper. It's like,
no, for me, I mean, I'm still that fat kid at heart. I mean, that's one of the reasons I run so much, is so I can, certain people that don't know me, they'll go out to dinner and like, how can you eat that much? It's like, that's why I run 20 to 30 miles a week, just so I'm able to do that. I just, it's what my body craves. That's why I do it, because otherwise I would be 300 pounds. And,
and you have a hard time walking up the stairs, because you'd be like bigger, and your muscles would be not as conditioned as they are. So. And
it's one of the talks I have with a lot of people, especially service members, is I always hear people my age, I just turned 50 this year, I can't run my back and my knees. And I'll never forget.
I hear people my age, Matt, who are like in their late 20s, early 30s, who are like, I can't run, or I can't walk. The worst is when people who are like 25 to 30, and because I'm turning 32 in like a month, who are like in my age range, who are like, I can't go for a walk. I'm like, my friend, what? Come again. Like, where is the effort level here? Is it like below the floor? You can't go walk a 1/4 of a mile and come back? Like, let's try, okay? Let's ride the bike. Let's do something. Like, you have to move your body.
So for me personally, I mean, I worked in the trades for a few years before I went to college, and then was in the Merchant Marine following that. I mean, I beat my knees and my back mercifully. So when I did start a run, my knees and especially my lower back really bothered me. And I remember talking to Nicole and talking to other trainers, and they said, this is going to be a painful couple months, because until you work the muscles and strengthen the muscles around your knees and your ligaments and your knees and your back, it's going to be painful. But all of a sudden, you're going to wake up one day, you're going to be running, and you're going to be at the gym, and you're going to be pain-free. And it took me a good solid 2 months, maybe almost 3 months. And I remember, I'll never forget, I was doing like a 5-mile training run.
And you're like, oh.
And about mile 3, I realized, I'm like, I'm in no pain.
Yeah.
I'm like, and it was like, I felt good. I'm like, I felt like I was like 19 again. I was like, and I still to this day think of that once in a while. It was like, it was a significant, event in my life, because it's like, I was thoroughly convinced that I was never going to be able to run pain-free or walk pain-free or go do stuff. And, I hear people my age do it all the time, or to your point, people younger. It's like, no, it's not your knees and your back. Granted, there are plenty of knee injuries and back injuries that do, but the vast majority of people are, number one, you're probably carrying 20 extra pounds of weight that you don't need. And those ligaments, because you've just been you're doing the same thing every day in, day out. So those muscles don't get used. They don't get strengthened anymore. But you strengthen those muscles and you will be pain-free. Going to a chiropractor has made a significant, improvement in my life. All these pains, I always joke, my first ruck, I had tons of feet issues, especially on my right foot. And I went to the chiropractor after the ruck. And within 30 seconds, he adjusted my foot, and I was pain-free. And I remember almost crying, saying, I went through all that pain, and all it took was 30 seconds of, and it was just one of those lessons in life. It's like, somebody had told me to go see a chiropractor, and I didn't listen. So now when I see people training early on, I'm like, go to a chiropractor. Trust me, you'll thank me later. you know,
I saw my acupuncturist this past week even too, and like my calf was having like a weird like stiffness in it, and took her like 5-10 minutes to do like the electrode acupuncture thing. I stood up and I was like, wow, I am a new human now. Like, and it was like I was on the table doing like full body acupuncture for like an hour total, and I felt like I had a brand new body. I was like, wow, 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 wow.
Yeah, those things make a huge difference. I mean, even last year we started doing a lot of the ice baths and the saunas, and you know, there's places that do the combination of both. And you know, I look at it as in lieu of a full body massage. You're basically you're heating the muscles and you're contracting them, heat them and contract them. You know, you stand back and think about it. It's like it's exactly what it's doing, and but you're doing the entire body. I've done some of the acupuncture. I've done the cupping. It all works.
Yeah.
You know, and some of it's finding what works for your body. You know, it's same with the nutrition, same with your training programs, whether it's cross training or if it's running. You know, certain things work for certain people. You know.
You have to just like you have to learn and then lean into what you find works for you. I feel like and I agree with you too. I feel like people just give up too early a lot of the times. Like I have newer runners who. I have some friends who have started running recently who I'm like so proud of because they've started running their own 5Ks and they're doing great. And like they also went through that period where they're like, it's painful, Julie. And I was like, just hang on. Like, is it actually, like, are you actually hurt? They're like, no, I'm just sore. I'm like, okay, that's fine.
Yes,
is it a sharp pain or is it a dull pain? They're like, it's dull pain. I was like, cool, keep moving.
Yes, there's a significant difference between soreness and pain, you know, and sometimes you got to find that threshold where, you know, it's like, okay, are you pushing through the pain or are you pushing just through soreness?
Yeah.
And we're all guilty of doing both, you know. Oh,
I definitely have. Don't worry.
You know, you don't do a marathon or any kind of endurance race without pushing through some pain, you know, the soreness.
People who run marathons and say they weren't in pain at all the entire time. I'm like, you are lying to me. There's no way.
You weren't pushing hard enough if you weren't in pain.
You were just taking a jaunty walk if that's what happened. Yeah, like even if you take a jaunty walk, you're probably still going to be in pain after 26.2 miles. I mean, come on.
Yeah, it's, you know, we always laugh during training. It's just like, suck it up, buttercup. And, you know, you think back to some of that military stuff, but, you know, which is not always correct. There was a lot of pushing through pain that we shouldn't have been pushing through that we did. But,
I can agree with that.
You know, but during training or especially early on, and anybody's running, you know, there's some soreness and borderline pain you got to run through to push yourself. And, you know, I mean, I've finished to the point we were talking about earlier. If you're finishing a marathon or an endurance race, and
you didn't have any points where you were like, I could quit right now.
Or you can, you know, the next day you're like, oh, I could run. Yeah, it's like, your training program worked, but you also got to, you know, we all as runners, we also look at like, did I push hard enough? You know, if I'm to the point where I can walk easily the next day, did I really push myself hard enough? And it's probably not
your goal too.
Yeah, it's probably not the most, you know, the best mentality to have, but that's just kind of how we are, right?
We're also in that brain too, and I found myself even after I finished my ultra on Saturday, being like I felt like I was definitely tired, and like my hip was a little bit achy the next day. So I was like, okay, I'm glad I didn't push myself super hard, but I was like, could I have run faster and could I have run further? And that's kind of the question you ask yourself, especially if you end up in the crazy wild like ultra marathoning scene where people are just like a little bit off their rockers to begin with, and I'm in that category, and so I totally get it, you know.
I can delve into that realm, so you know, no,
But you start like, I feel like runners also are people, especially like distance runners, we're looking to push our limits, whether that's in speed or whether that's in distance. And if we don't hit that limit, we wonder where it is. We're like, where is the limit though? Why am I not destroyed? Why am I not just like, why are the wheels not fully falling off the wagon? Because we're always just looking for that limit, which is not necessarily the healthiest thing in the entire world because it can sometimes lead to like self-destruction. But I feel like, especially as someone who's dealt with any kind of addiction, it's like looking for that limit is just kind of a thing that's probably going to keep happening in some capacity in your life. And this is just my personal opinion, I would say it's probably better that it's with running than it is with alcohol. And that would just be my take on that.
So that's kind of addiction and alcoholism in a nutshell, is pushing the limit you're pushing it every day.
Yeah.
You know,
which is what a lot of running is too.
It is, and that's kind of why you know, when I say you're trading one unhealthy addiction for a healthy addiction, that's kind of what you're doing. I hate to say it, but it did take a place in my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It took that. It served a couple masters. It served. I needed to do something that took a significant amount of time because I suddenly had all this time, and the last thing I wanted to be doing is sitting in my own head. Granted, while I'm running, I'm in my own head, but you know, it was in a healthy manner. You know, and I was pushing myself. So I was getting healthy. I was doing something that was, you know, significant.
You're connecting with the community around you as well.
I was connecting with the community, healthy people in the community. I was helping out, you know, serving others at the same time. You know, Alcoholics Anonymous and in general is a service program. You know, most people, and I do serve a lot of alcoholics. I speak a lot at detoxes, jails, institutions. Thank you. But, you know, I also help with the veteran community. That's why I looked at that as it was serving a couple masters, and it was helping achieve what I was trying to achieve, which was, you know, doing something other than just helping take guys out fishing, which is second nature for me. You know, we still do that. It's great. I'll be doing that in June. I'll be doing 2 trips in June.
Nice.
But, you know, that's only doing something for the day.
Yeah.
You know, by helping in these other capacities, we're now helping people year round, helping people, you know, get dogs, get treatments through horses or what have you. There's a million different programs out there now, and most of the programs. The one thing, if I can do a quick shout out for Heroes in Transition, is
you can do a long shout out.
You know, they're the one thing. If you look them up, is and Cindy Jones and Ken Jones, who founded it after the death of their son Eric. They focus on the family. So one thing I liked about that was, you know, their focus is not just on helping the veteran and the individual. It's they're trying to, by fixing the family, you fix the veteran. You know, how you do that, whether that's with a dog, whether it's through equestrian, whether it's just the entire family being in tune or being involved in these programs, and it depends on each you know, they kind of take each person. Look at the situation and say, okay, we'll start you doing this, but we're going to have your wife go to this program, you're going to have your kids go to this program, and then you guys are going to come for a whole week to a camp with horses and do it together. You know, I've watched it. I've been involved. They've helped me through significant issues myself on a personal level. You know, not the addiction side of it, but other issues within my life. They've helped. You know, that, you know, they look at it and say, okay, this is why this program's here, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so I've been, not only have I helped raise funds for the organization, not only am I part of the organization, but they've helped me, they've used some of those funds for me personally. You know, and that, it's just the way my story ended up going, you know what I mean? It was just, when I was sitting in a detox facility trying to, you know, keep myself from, ended up like my father and my brother. I could, you know, if you had told me at that time that I was going to be running these long distance events and doing this, I would have told you, I would have laughed at you, or told you I was going to be sitting here in this room doing a podcast on running. I would have laughed at you. You know what I mean? You know, it's just, it's just funny how life works. You know what I mean? You just never know that, you know, those little decisions that you don't realize, like, I'm just going to go for a run. And then, I'll go check out this informational session, see what this thing's all about. And then next thing you know, it's, you know, I'm strapping on I'm putting a 30-pound rucksack on my back, and, you know,
and it feels like second nature to you, because it's like what the 100th, not really, but like then whatever X number of rucks that you've done. Like, this isn't your first one.
No, this was, you know, the 7th one I've done. Technically my 8th one overall, but it was really my 7th. We've had to do a couple virtual ones in there that we, you know, whether you want to count them or not, we still did the distance and we still ran and we raised money.
That's good.
You know. But no, to your point, I've done enough of them, you know, and I've done enough of the Ragnar Ultras on the, you know, we started doing those 6 months apart from each other, just so we could it helped with our training. That way we couldn't really you couldn't just sit on your laurels. You had to kind of stay within that training regimen, you know, do some races in between. And, I just found the endurance stuff works for me, you know, and now I've done a bunch of them. I start looking at, okay, is this, you know, what can I do next? You know, to your earlier point of, you know, I know I can do those. Where are my limits? You know, I've done some other stuff, you know, and whether it's mountain climbing, whether it's, you know, winter mountain climbing, whether it's doing other type of events that, you know, that kind of serves that same purpose of, you know, it's a healthy outlet of, you know, keeping your mind in check, And that's I think for me, running is that was the biggest thing. Is it kept my mind in check as far as it. I noticed after if I didn't run for a significant time, when I say significant, I mean a week or two, it was really bothering me. I didn't notice it at the time, but all of a sudden it's like, why am I going back into these bad habits and in a bad mindset? And then somebody's like, hey, when was the last time you ran? Like 2 weeks ago. Why don't you go out for a run? And I went out for a run and I'm like, I'm good now. It's just after 30 years of alcohol, that alcoholic mind, and that's one thing that people don't realize, that I would say if you have somebody in your family that's going through, that significant of a change due to whether it's alcoholism or addiction, which are essentially the same thing, it's just a different driver that you're putting in your body, is they don't realize the amount of change that has to happen within your mind and your brain. You literally have to, your mind has to rewire itself,
Big time.
And that's something that's not talked about enough. And I think running in general helped with that significantly because it just gave my mind something to just, I had that time when I was out there, whether it was an hour, half hour, 45 minutes, where my mind was just focused. It's just like going to the gym. It's just, instead of going to the gym and lifting for 2 hours, I was out running, whether it was an hour or two, and it just, you focused on that one thing. And again, it was a healthy thing to focus on. And I was around healthy people that were, discussing healthy things. We weren't sitting in a bar room. We weren't sitting in my basement, drinking myself to death. At the end is what I was doing,
and it gives you space to kind of think about other things too. Like once you hit a certain point with running, I'm sure you find that the exercise of running gets out some of that like stress that you would normally dispel via drinking, and then it also gives you not only time because you're outside running, you can think all you want, whether that's a good or a bad thing. Sometimes it's a bad thing, sometimes it's a good thing, and you can think about what's going on, and it gives you, I know for me, it gives me space that I am getting rid of some of that anxiety and stress in my body, like via the actual physical motion, and it just frees up a little bit of that brain space that I need to slot in those things that I really need to like work through in my brain. And I will say too, like even this morning, I can feel the shift in my brain and in my body when I go back into being like regular human mode after I start my run, where I'm just like, oh, okay, that clicked in, and now I feel like I'm a functioning human again, because there was just like some level of like biting anxiety or fear or something that was hanging out in the back of my brain that needed to like unwedge itself after a certain number of like steps or miles or whatever. And like, this morning it was like 5 miles in, and my body was like, okay, I just felt like the dehissing, and I was like, okay, there's the brain space I needed to think about other things. I found it again.
Yeah, and the other thing too, I think, is that, it's that, whether it's going to the gym or running, it's that accomplishment, you get that.
Yeah, you finish.
It's like, I love running first thing in the morning because it's like you start your day with a win.
Yeah, you get a big check mark at the beginning of the day.
There's a great book and a great podcast out there with Admiral McRaven talks about make your bed, no matter what, make your bed.
Yeah.
You can have the worst day in the world, but you come home and it's number one, the first accomplishment of your day, but it's also, you come home and you got a made bed, and
you just feel a little bit more put together and a little bit more just like you're doing something, as opposed to just like meandering aimlessly through the world the entire day, which you can have you can go for a run and still have a day like that, but then you still have something anchoring you again, like the bed, like it's anchoring you to being a human being and feeling like you're doing something productive, which isn't, you don't need to be productive to be a human being, but I feel like, especially if you're a part of the service, productivity is from what I can tell, is very much driven into you. It's a thing. And then there's just a lot of people like myself where I'm like, I don't feel like a human if I'm not working and doing something, working towards a goal.
It's obviously it's very structured, whether it's the Navy, whether it's any of the branches of the service, even the Merchant Marine's very structured. You have to be, you're in a job function where everything has to be a certain way,
You're a cog in the giant like clock. Like if your cog is not moving correctly, you throw off the whole rest of the clock. So you better be a good moving cog in that clock.
And I think people that, you start training for, and that's probably, part of why it works so well for me, is because it brought me back to that, this is a structure. All right, now I got to train. I'm like, this is my plan for the week. I know what I'm going to do for the week. You know, my mind likes to function that way. It's like I want to know what I'm doing Monday, you know, through Friday. You know, to the point of like even meals. You know what I mean? Even like you know, setting up the nutrition plan. All right, what am I going to eat? How am I going to do this? You know what I mean? It's that whole thing just, it works for me. You know what I mean? It's definitely kept me on a much more even keel than I was in the past. And I notice when I'm not training, that's one of the things, and we're all guilty of this.
Yeah.
You know, all of a sudden you stop training for something and, you know, you start slacking a little bit, and it's like you just that thing in the back of your mind saying, "What are you doing? You're lazy. Why are you not doing this?" You know, and I find myself even when I'm not training, like, yeah, I'll put my meal plan, you know, get my meal plan out for the week, and you know.
I feel like service members are particularly, as someone who was the dietitian at the VA for a little bit, particularly guilty of being, I wouldn't say addicted, but like really, at least for a certain point in time, dependent on structure and really loving. Big fans of structure, and big fans of falling fully apart if the structure is not there. And just the number of people who I would see who like their eating style was just like, I don't even know what. And I was like, but the second you give them like any kind of organized plan, they fall right into it. They like boom, 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 boom. I'm like, okay, so all you needed was like instructions. Let's say it. You needed a plan and instructions, because as soon as you give them the instructions, they are following it to the exact. I would get so many questions being like, is it a third of a cup or a quarter of a cup? And I'm just like, doesn't really matter that much, but you know, hey, you're like trying to keep it chill, but also like giving people the structure that they want.
And it's, you know, it falls right into line with like early sobriety. It's early sobriety, you're making such a significant change in not only your body, your mind, and everything, that you need that, you know, it's why running works so well, because you need that structure early on.
Yeah.
It's, you know, you look at, you know, I use Alcoholics Anonymous because it's a 12-step program. It's structured that way for a reason. There's a reason you start here and you work your way up here. And there's a reason that, you know, if I'm helping somebody in early sobriety, it's like, this is what you do first thing in the morning. This is your next step. You know, I always use Adam McRaven. It's like, make your bed. You know what I mean? Win number one for the day. You know what I mean? Because you need that positivity in your life in your mindset to say, all right, I got that accomplished. You know, if the rest of the day goes to hell, I have that. You know, but if you have your day structured, it's a lot easier to deal with stuff. You know. And then, I mean, obviously, as you get some sobriety, things change, and you can lax up on a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, you get a little more flexible.
But I find myself, it's just the longer it goes, the more that structure just works. It's like when I don't have it in my life, I let stuff overwhelm me. You know, I can go without it. I can deal with it with not having that structure. But my life just goes much better when it's there. You know what I mean? You know, and my life goes much better when I'm able to run, especially if I can run we have certain mornings we run. You know, usually Tuesdays and Thursday mornings. You know, and it's usually Saturday mornings. Even when we're not in between, if I don't have a race coming up, I just keep myself that consistency. Consistency keeps my running base there, and it just it becomes part of your DNA. It becomes part of your structure, and it's like you move that apple cart, and it's like, wait, what's going on? Why is this is something's not right here?
Oh yeah, no, I know that anytime I've gone without running for like 2 or 3 or 4 days, I usually run every morning. I'm just like so off as a human. I'm like, what is going on? What is happening here? What is the meaning of life? I do not know anymore. And just like, it's hard, you know. And I feel like most runners will identify with like the whole structure thing, because I feel like we are definitely, for the most part, a group of humans who like to have routine, and we like to have structure, and we like to have some format of like consistency when it comes to like either the amount of miles that you're running, the days that you run on, the distances that you're running, like races that you're signed up for, things like that. Where I feel like runners specifically are very guilty of like falling into a routine and being slightly rigid about it sometimes, you know. My 10-year-old about a week ago, he's not a runner. He plays baseball. He's run a couple of 1-mile races with me, but he said, "Hey, I want to go, Dad, let's go for a run." And I was rehabbing my legs. I'm like, no, I can't. And then I finally realized he just wants to do something with Dad. And it's the first time he's ever asked to go running like that. So I go, you know what, let's go. Yeah.
And he's sitting there watching me, and he's watching me set my watch. He's watching me, I laid out what I was going to wear. I had my my running sneakers, and he starts asking me all these questions, and you don't realize, to your point, of how structured you are about the type of socks we wear, the type of underwear we wear, the type of shirts we wear, the type of which watch am I get, which watch.
Setting your watch up, being like, I feel like you guys probably realize it at the Ruck when you are setting up your bags to bring into the cars, and like even with my race on Saturday. Like I have a packing list that I've made on Google Sheets that like I run through because I'm in the mindset of like prepare for any weather, which I'm sure you guys are too, because you never know. So I bring one of everything, and I make sure I have one of everything, and like I like test the air in before I step out of my car, and I'm like walking around in my gear, and I'm like, do I need to change anything? How am I feeling about this? And then I also left like backups like ready to go just in case my socks got too wet, and I have like my specific merino wool socks that I like know. I'm like, okay, do I want the high ones or the short one? Like there's a very complicated math equation happening. A very complicated math equation happening. But I think, again, like if you talk to newer runners, like if you talk to people who like are part of your Ruck team or like the other ultramarathon runners I was running with, we're all kind of on the same page. We all understand that like math equation that's happening. Everyone's math equations is slightly different. But someone will come up to you and be like, yeah, I brought these gloves with me. And you're like, yeah, I get it. Whereas you talk to someone who's new into running and they're like, what shoes are you wearing? You're like, shoes. I have to calculate everything else I'm wearing too. Shoes plus all these other things. And what direction is the wind blowing? And do I need like this watch? Do I want a hat? Like it's a complicated math equation that you develop as the more you run. But I think it definitely is something that is very, I was going to say jarring, but just kind of life affirming almost when you interact with younger into running runners, like people who are newer runners, and they don't have that math equation really sussed out yet, and they're just like thinking, I want to go out running, look at a basic level.
So we go through every year with the Ruck event, especially because you get these people that have never done it before. They might be a runner, and we get a lot of people that come in that are, I've done marathons. It's like, that's great. You got a really good base behind you, but this is completely different. And yeah, we use these plastic bins, and I'll have, it's like I had 10 legs the last race. I think I had each bag, we use 2 gallon Ziploc bags. It's got short sleeve, long sleeve, cold socks, warm socks, short sleeve, long sleeve, tank top, you know, and then you have, I've got to the point now where I have it laid out. It's like, okay, I look at the weather the day before, and it's like, okay, I have this is the first night run, hot and cold, second night run, all cold, because you just know, and it changes. I'll pack probably 2-3 days in advance. And this year, I had to take everything out and repack because the weather changed enough in 48 hours that it was like, this is not going to work. Went from took all the long sleeves out and put in all tank tops because we had 70, touched on almost 70, which we hadn't trained in. It wasn't 70, it was like 65, but he hadn't trained in that, which is always fun.
In like 20, 30, 40 degree weather, I'm sure.
But in the middle of the night, you're touching down in the 30s, which is usually what we're used to.
Yeah, you chuck your jacket on or your long sleeve or something like that, and it's just, I went through the same thing on Saturday too, where like it had been so warm all this week, like 70, 60 degrees. And then it was like 45 on Saturday and rainy. And I was like, okay, well, I guess we're changing outfits here. This is a costume change. And so like the whole outfit I had laid out completely changed.
And, you get these new runners that whether it's, any of these big events, like my first marathon, it's like I'd never done, I think I'd done a 10K and then I did a half, but it was the first time I'd ever had to fuel really because I'd never really run enough of a distance. I can run a half without fueling. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, now I got to learn this whole fueling program and, and being a very structured person, I started running. I made sure I started running with people that had a significant amount of marathons under their belt, just so I know. It's like, okay, how do you do this? How do you do that? It's like, all right, and I tried, every training plan, every fueling plan until I found one that worked for me,
a lot of trial and error.
You always go back to your basics, but it's like, okay, I'm going to try this, the goose, I'll try this one, and all of a sudden it's like, I'm not trying that one again because after 14 miles we were turning back around because that wasn't going to work, But you get people in these new events, and especially if they've never done it, and all of a sudden they're like, I need 10 sets of clothes. Like, yeah, not only 10 sets of clothes, you need hot and cold, you need at minimum 2 or 3 pairs of sneakers. You know, you need, you know,
Gloves, hand warmers,
gloves,
potentially, like some kind of like rain jacket maybe.
and we take it for granted because once you've done it a couple of times, you know what you need.
Oh yeah.
And your earlier point, yeah, everybody on my team's done it a couple of times, so I don't have to. But you get these other people that call you or asking like, hey, how do I do this? So I'll lay everything out on my bed, and it's like you get that. You can just see when they reply like, I wasn't expecting that. It's like, yeah, this is, you know, do you need all this? Not necessarily, but this is kind of what you need. You know,
mentally, you need all those items. Like for your own mental sanity and to know that you are prepared, you need all those items. Just like how I bring one of everything to every marathon that I run, like the night before. Mentally, I need all my items.
Yeah.
We need to wear them all, but mentally, for my own sanity, I need them. They're my friends.
And it becomes, you know, once you have that stuff, as you know, if you don't have it and like have forgotten stuff, and it throws you off significantly.
Oh yeah, it's a big throw off.
It's like, oh, I don't have this, I don't have that, and it's like, you know, depending on where the race is or what you're doing, sometimes you can go buy that stuff, but you know, a lot of times, like if we're up in the mountains,
it's not there.
you're making do with what you have, which from, you know, being a veteran, being, you know, service related, it's easy because you're used to not having a lot of that stuff, but you know, you get into the civilian world and you get used to that stuff, and it's like, no, I want those nice socks. I want those. You know, I'm not running two legs in the same socks. No, that ain't happening.
No. Only barbarians are doing that.
Yeah, so we do become those. We become kind of a drama queen when it comes to that type of stuff. We're all guilty of that, you know, which is fine. You know, it should be, you know. But
yeah, it just reminds me too of the people, because I announced the Cape Cod Marathon, who wear our shirt during the actual marathon, which it's still a great shirt, and like I wear it running, but I'm the person who, like, I never trust a shirt. I was the person when I ran my first half marathon, I ran in the race shirt, which ended up being okay, but I've learned since then that we don't trust a shirt. You take a shirt out on a training run, you don't take it for a marathon first.
Exactly.
You gotta test out your gear, because just because something works for the person next to you doesn't mean that it's gonna work for you. And sometimes it works out to plan a little bit if you can.
You know, it's funny you bring up the shoes. When I first started, I didn't know you had to get fitted. And I kept trying different sneakers. And that's why one of the reasons I had so much issues with my feet is because I kept switching brands. And I'm
Probably
thinking,
like the sizing wasn't correct or whatever.
Exactly. I had the wrong size, and then it was after the fact. Somebody's like, "Oh, you need to go get size," or somebody had told me, and I didn't listen. You know, it was just in.
They're like, just go to a running store or Dick's Sporting Goods or something and get yourself a decent pair of shoes.
I did that after the fact, and next thing you know, it's like they watched me, they fitted me, and next thing I'm like, oh, this is what it's supposed to feel like. Yeah, I went a half a size up that I was, you know, didn't understand I had to do, and and now to the point now where I only run with one brand, one model that seems to work for me. I've tried them all, and the adrenalines seem to work for me, even though they keep changing them. But I get fitted every 4 or 5 change outs, and they still go back to those. So until they change them enough that.
Yeah, the new version's a lot different than the last version. The Ghost also just changed quite a lot as well too.
Well, I'm also cheap, so I try and I buy the one that the model before, because I usually get them on sale. So it catches up to me once in a while, and I have to, you know, but when you can't, because I have to run with wides, so they don't have a lot of wides available. So it's
yeah. And the Adrenaline in the Brooks line, the Adrenaline is one of the more narrow shoes from Brooks specifically.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
I have to do I've run with the double wides, which I can, but the wide works for me. But the standard one I cannot run. It's 2 miles in, I'm taking them off. Yeah,
I can't run in the standard Adrenaline either. I have a little bit of a wider foot, and that doesn't. No, I've started drifting towards like ultras recently, and like topos with like the big toe boxes. That's a fun time. That's a nice time.
I need to try them again. I tried them again. I've tried them a couple times, and I just it's probably more of a mental thing. I just can't. It's too much room, and my feet just don't.
You gotta. It's a lot of it is, and you kind of noted this with the Adrenaline within the Brooks line. Trying out different shoes if you can within the lines of shoes. Like if you find that, I found that like even within the Ultra brand, like there are certain shoes that run a little bit more narrow, and there's some that are a little bit wide, and like some have more of a tapered toe box, and some of them don't. And then same with Brooks as well too. It's obnoxious and annoying that happens, but it's just kind of a reality of the situation.
So I ran the Marine Corps with the Adrenaline, the glycerins.
The 21?
I don't remember what, it would have been so it was 23, It was a couple years back.
I feel like I fitted you for those.
You
shoes,
probably did.
Matt.
You might have even talked me into it.
Yeah, probably.
I might have cursed you a little bit halfway
think-
through.
Yeah,
They were
but I
fine
think-
for the first half, and then they started. It was more of a mental block. They were fine. It was more of a mental block than anything, because it was just
Yeah.
one of those. You get to that point and you start thinking, what changes? Like, oh, I shouldn't have got these shoes. I should have stuck with the adrenalines, you know. But trust me, that wasn't the reason I had issues. It was more the So to the what we were talking about earlier, changes in weather that you don't train for. So that was the year that we had this freak 70-degree day in the second week in November, and we had been running in 40 and 50-degree weather for the last month or two, and and that was so they gave out shirts for that race. It was long sleeves with a turtleneck, and there were people that showed up wearing those turtlenecks. I'm like, there's no way. I'm like, I remember looking at people saying, "You're going to be taking that off in like 2 miles." Like, oh no, I'm going to wear this the whole race. Like, no, you will not. You know, it was, you know.
No, you gotta know your gear too. You gotta know your gear, which includes shoes and stuff too. But yeah, no, definitely. I feel like with shoes too, because I try out a lot of different shoes now, and like I used to have like a really big. I used to only exclusively run in the Hoka Clifton because like I just didn't trust any other shoes. I had really bad trust issues with shoes, and I was just like, anytime something happened, I'd be like, it was the shoes, and then through like trying out, like now I'm probably up in the hundreds of shoes that I've tried out.
Imagine.
I have 30 shoes in my rotation like currently, and
wow.
I've just switched a few out. So it's just like the more you try different shoes, the more you learn. I like to ask myself, Julianne, is it a you problem or a shoe problem? Because sometimes it's a shoe problem.
Yeah, I fall into that role. It's, you know, I stick with the adrenalines because I know it's a mental thing where it's like I won't question myself if I'm wearing them. Where if I try something different, it's just
it's the question of it's a shoe problem or it's a you problem comes in. Whereas if something else happens when you're wearing the adrenaline,
it's time to try a different, you know, different style at least this time around. So again, I got to try some different races. So, you know.
Yeah, I think you might really like maybe not the ultras because they have 0 drop. And
I did not like those at all. I've tried them twice now, and I just
the
did not like
your shoe that you're wearing right now. The Adrenaline has a pretty aggressive drop on it. Depending on the model you're wearing, is somewhere between 10 and 12 millimeters, which for running shoes is like one of the most aggressive drops out there. So to go from that to like a 0 drop shoe would not be a great idea. So I would try Topos honestly because they have like a regular drop in them, but they have that wider toe box. That would be my recommendation. If you're looking for wide toe box.
I'll check them out. Yeah.
So the only challenge with the Topos, which probably isn't a concern to you because you're coming from Brooks, not to slight Brooks, but they're kind of derpy looking shoes, you know. The Topo shoes are like not the most stylish, but I mean, honestly, to be fair, Brooks is not the most stylish shoe either. So.
No, they're not. And especially where I wear the wides, you have like limited to like 2 or 3 different colors. So I end up with blacks or whites or grays. It's just, I'm just, you know, it is what it is. You know, I'm not out there running for style. So
same. I don't really care what color my shoes are. It used to make me laugh when I was working at the running shoe store. People come in, they're like, I only wear white shoes or blue shoes or whatever the color of choice is. And for me, I genuinely don't care. My preference, honestly, is to have the brightest shoes possible because then people can see me.
Well, I run a lot at night, so I try and have the brightest. The other thing that can be an issue with the wides and the, you know, only a couple of colors is half the time I end up with the same color. So now I'm like marking the shoes.
Oh, you don't know which one is the new one.
So
and the
3 o'clock in the morning when I'm trying to swap shoes out, it's like, okay, do I have the right, you know, which ones do I have on? Do I have which set, the old set, the new set? And so, I've ended up using markers or some tape or something on them because I've realized halfway through a run, I was like, oh, I got a new one on the right foot and the old one on the left foot because you can just feel just enough of a difference. And, you know, it's...
That's pretty funny, actually.
Which, again, we were talking about earlier, the new runners have no idea. They're like, what are you talking about? New shoes, old shoes? It's like, oh,
they have one pair of shoes that they just run all their runs in. And they're probably also walking around in, too, which I do not recommend. Do not walk around in your current running shoes. Old running shoes, fine, whatever.
Tricks I learned. I would use my same sneakers or shoes to go to the gym, do this and that, or I wasn't tracking mileage. You know, I can just imagine that the first pair I probably had 600-700 miles on them. They would completely toast. You know, and you know, and I learned with the Brooks, especially, you know, with the stuff we do, if we're running with weight, you know, we learn from you guys that it reduces the mileage on them significantly.
It compresses them faster.
You know, and I know what I can get out of a pair of shoes. It's like I now track them. Never did that before. It was one of the things my son was amazed at was that I had it on my watch so I could track how many
run
miles.
shoes.
He's like,
Yeah.
how do you know how many miles are? And I showed him the app and everything. And being a 10-year-old that's in electronics, he's like, that's cool. He's like, when can I get a watch? I'm like, you got a ways to go. So,
when you get a job, my friend.
yeah, exactly.
That's when you can have a watch.
So, yeah.
They are not cheap, but they're
Yeah.
useful to me for my purposes right now.
And usually by the time I upgrade my watch, it's because it completely stopped working, and it's
Same.
not something I can hand down.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. I'm in the same camp too. I think I've had my Coros for like going on 3 or 4 years now, and it's still doing great. It definitely has less battery than when it started, but like the Coros watches are like known for their long battery. So I think it had like on full GPS mode, at least an hour a day, had like 2 weeks in it on one charge. Now it's down to like 1 week, which honestly is still good. Still good.
Yeah, that was the one thing I noticed on mine is, if I'd run a long distance race, I'm gonna have to get a new watch because same thing. It only goes about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. So I'm like, that's not gonna work on a. I don't think I could even get a half marathon out of it right now. I'd be running with a battery, and that's not gonna work. So.
Yeah. See, I did my ultra on Saturday, and I had like 40% left on my watch, and I was like, that's good, and it was. I still had like 10% left on the watch when I finished. So I was like, there we go. That's right. Those good Coros batteries, a little bit better than the Garmin's sometimes, The Garmin's are getting better. It just kind of depends on the model, too, and how old your watch is. So a lot of things happen in here, a lot of factors at play. But, I feel like we've reached a good point, Matt.
Okay, sounds great.
Anything else you wanted to let people know that's happening that you're going to be a part of anytime soon, or just shout outs to organizations that you're working with so people can go find information about them if they'd like?
So obviously, Heroes in Transition is the organization I'm probably most closely tied to at this point. I do a lot with Cape Cod veterans, both two organizations here on the Cape that play two different roles, but they help significantly with local veterans.
Yeah, for sure.
So, one thing I would say is if anybody happens to be watching this, it is struggling with whether it's addiction, alcoholism, or any type of issue, reach out to somebody. I wish, if there's one thing I wish I had done is reached out earlier and reached that point earlier in my life. We often say, you're going to get to a point where have you had enough pain? And I wish my pain threshold had been a lot lower than it was when I finally walked through the doors of a detox center.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of the organizations here on the Cape, just because they don't promote, helping people in addiction, doesn't mean that a lot of these organizations have programs that are not advertised, that are off to the side.
Yeah.
So just because it doesn't say it on the website, reach out to people. Cape Cod veterans, and also I do a lot with Spaulding Rehab here on the Cape, who does a lot with veterans. They are an amazing organization.
I will second that. I'm going to get acupuncture there on Thursday. I love my acupuncturist very much.
The fishing trip we do in June, 90% of the people on that trip are from their program. They do a sport and spirit event here on the Cape in early June, and we have the pleasure of being the last event for them on the Monday at the end of the weekend. And it's just you talk about people that just walking angels. I don't know if you know who you know in that organization, but shout out to Mary Pat Stone of Spaulding. She runs the adaptive sports program, and she's just I
love that.
Yeah, just somebody who she's on par with other people in my life that have just literally helped save my life. So they're people that they give up a lot of stuff in their life to help others. You know what I mean? They're doing jobs because they love them, not because it's what it pays, or it's just amazing individuals. So if anybody's interested in the Ruck for HIT, I know you plan on having some other people from the Ruck and from HIT on, but it's a great event. Raises a good amount of money if you're up for a challenge. We often say not to get on Ragnar, but we often say it's Ragnar on steroids, and I can say that having done 5 or 4 Ragnar ultras. It is. It's harder. It's harder than a marathon. I've had people tell me we've had 2 people on our team that have gotten multiple Ironman finishers and have said that the event's harder than an Ironman. It's not.
Just like Julianne has not signed up for this yet. Multiple people have been like, Julianne, you should do this, and I'm like, I don't think so, my friends.
But that being said, I watch people that it's one of those events. It's kind of like Ragnar, where it's spread out over a long period of time. So, if you train properly for it, you can do it. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
I'm living proof. I did it when I had no business doing it. You know what I mean? I'm not going to say it was easy. I'm not going to say I didn't want to get through it pain-free, but it was, it's, I've also watched people run marathons that never really done one before, that have never run a race before and train and make it. So it's really all about desire and how much,
how much you want it.
How much do you want it? How much, how much no quit do you have in you? That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but no, I greatly appreciate having me on. It's been an honor. It really has.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
I think it's fabulous to have you on, Matt, and you're just a part of the Falmouth running community now. And I think that that's a fantastic thing. So
thank you.
Definitely happy to have you, and definitely happy to promote all of the really wonderful programs that you've been a part of and still continue to be a part of in the community, just enhancing the community even more so. So I think that's really important and also really wonderful. Do you want to do a fun segment at the end? I feel like I know the answer to this one, but we'll do it anyway, Matt. We're going to do, what shoe do you choose to use? So you can tell me, which I think I know what it is, your favorite shoe you've ever run in, or if you have, maybe if you want to mention the first shoe that you ever started running in potentially along with that, because I think we know your favorite shoe.
So my favorite would definitely be a Brooks Adrenaline. The first shoe I ran, and I ran on these for quite a while.
Maybe you have a favorite model of the Adrenaline too. I don't know if you have a favorite version.
Probably, it was probably like the 18s or something. I forget. It was one of the first ones I ran in, probably because it made such a difference that I think it just, in my mind, it felt like it was so much better. I think it was like the 18, or I want to say it was the 18, somewhere along those lines. No, when I first got out of detox, I had no sneakers. I bought a pair of New Balance. They were like trail running shoes.
They had like the Hero or
I don't even remember, but they were on sale for like $30. And I ran on those for a good solid, close to like 6 or 7 months on the road in a
wow.
No idea until finally, I think it was Nicole Spencer. Finally, she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I had no idea." She's like, "No, she's like, you can't do that." She's like, "No, you need a good pair of running shoes." And shout out to Heroes in Transition. They do help veterans quite a bit. She knew I was a veteran. I had no money, and next thing you know, a gift card came my way for a pair of running shoes to, so I wasn't destroying my feet anymore. And foolishly, I didn't take the advice of her or the people at the running store, and I just got a pair of Asics, because that's the guy that was training me. That's what he ran in. So
yes. This sounds like a classic story here.
Classic, they must be good. He's running in them.
Yeah,
so
I'm the person next to you. What are you running in?
He's an Asics. So I'm going to run an Asics, not realizing what I needed to do.
Those are probably wicked narrow on your feet.
They were horrible. They were horrible on my feet. They felt better because I went from a trail running shoe.
There was had nothing left on the bottom.
Nothing left. So they felt great in the beginning, and then my feet started bothering me, and everybody's like, "Oh, it's just stride. It's this or that." I was wearing like stupid. I don't even remember what I was wearing for socks. Didn't have the right socks.
You're probably wearing like cotton socks. Your feet are swelling. The Asics of like the current Asics in the last like 2 or 3 years have trended a little bit on the wider side of an Asics shoe. But like I remember my first shoe that I ever ran in was an Asics too, like a real shoe. Besides, the first shoe I ever ran in was a $9 pair of shoes from Payless. Thank you so much. So we're in the same category.
Yep.
But I ran in an old model of the Asics Cumulus, and I don't even know if I could fit my foot physically into one of those shoes because they were so much more narrow than I really needed the shoe to be. But again, I think I went to like a Dick's Sporting Goods or like a DSW, and I just picked up a pair of shoes in college, and that's just what I ran in. And for some reason, it was like passably okay.
Yeah, I want to say that I want to say I bought those New Balance. I want to say it was in Kohl's or something like that. It wasn't. It was just I happened to be shopping for clothes, and I saw them like these will work. They were like $30 on sale, clearance or something. Like, these will work. And if I think back, they probably weren't even. I know they weren't the right size. So I probably got exactly the size I needed. So they need to be a minimum a half size bigger, probably a full size bigger at this point. I mean, it's
not
just
a wide, the regular width.
It was one off the shelf right there. It was a display model because it was probably on sale.
Yep.
And, you live and learn. You know what I mean? It's one of those things that, especially if you're watching this and you're a new runner, learn from other people's mistakes. Don't learn from your own if you can help it.
Yeah. And try and find things that work for your body personally.
Absolutely.
Don't ask the person standing next to you at a race what shoes they're wearing. Unless you're me and you just want to know for your own good, like what shoes, because I'll do what I call shoe spotting, where I'll try and call out shoes because I have a pretty in-depth knowledge of shoes, and I can pretty much spot a shoe and like tell you what it is, like off the top of the dome. But this is just a me problem and not an anyone else problem. So don't ask the person next to you at a race what shoes they're wearing unless you're just genuinely curious and want to learn about the shoe itself. That was great, Matt.
Thank you.
And very
Appreciate
nice. Happy to have you. And friends, definitely go check out Heroes in Transition and the Ruck for Hit. Do you guys have a website? Matt?
There is. It's heroesintransition.org. So one other organization I should shout out real quick is WellStrong here in Falmouth.
Yes.
It's a recovery gym. What's great about it is I think their monthly rate is like $10 a month if you're in recovery.
Yeah, it's some kind of like super accessible.
Very accessible. It's you have to be in recovery to be there. It's a very quiet gym. We do several sober running clubs out of there twice a week right now. Just if you're in recovery or if you're thinking about recovery, just go in there, talk to the people at the front desk, tell them what where you're at. It's a lot of it's what we do in recovery is based on Alcoholics Anonymous, but not necessarily just that, but it is all anonymous. So you walk in there, don't feel like somebody's going to out you if you're worried about that. You're not going to get outed. Nobody will ever say a word, so
and
just
whatever story you're telling them, it's probably not the first time they've heard
it.
And you're more than likely not going to shock them in any
capacity.
capacity.
People get people tell me all the time, I'm shocked at your story. It's like, if you listen to some of the stories I've heard, mine is minor and very nothing compared to what some of the stories I've friends of mine that I have in recovery, their stories would make mine look like a cakewalk, So to your point, they're not going to shock anybody. Trust me on that.
Oh yeah, so, Even my time at the VA, like I would hear things, and I was like, "Whoa, friends!" Like things that like I feel like the things you shared here today, Matt, are moving and like significant, but nothing like wild.
Yeah.
Like there are things, friends, if you talk to veterans for long enough, that you will hear that are just like, you would never even think to put these thoughts in your brain ever in your life. But yet these are situations that they've been in, and it makes a complete sense why there's capital T trauma in their brain.
So, to that point, I have a lot of friends that are combat veterans, and, we don't, the average civilian, let alone the average veteran, doesn't understand what they've gone through.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we do that fishing trip specifically, mostly for combat veterans, is so they have an area where they can go out away from land on a boat, and they're surrounded by fellow combat veterans, so they can talk amongst themselves.
Exactly.
They don't often have that ability, because even if they were in a room like this, they don't feel safe enough to talk about it.
Yeah.
To that point, as a general rule in the public, we hear it a lot now, more and more, is, be nice to people, because you never know what somebody's going through. If I pointed out some of these veterans to you, you wouldn't understand. You would look at them and say, there's no way that person's going through what they're going through, because they put I always use Robin Williams as the glaring example. If you had talked to him probably the day before, you would never know. My father was the same way. You would have never known my father was going to commit suicide. I often say you could have put 1,000 people in a lineup and said one of these people are going to commit suicide. My father would have been probably 999 on that list. So
people are very good at masking, especially if they've had to do it forever.
My brother was the same way too. So
yeah, even in the chronic illness community that I'm a bigger part of, it's hard to feel safe sometimes to be able to speak to people about things, because there's no concept a lot of the times when you talk to people who are not privy to anything that you've dealt with before. And then you talk to enough people who judge you, and then you just feel unsafe around everyone.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so having that mental and physical space to just express yourself authentically is really important.
Absolutely.
Super important.
Absolutely.
And that sense of community.
It's healthy. Even for people that aren't dealing with that, from a healthy mental health standpoint, you need that.
Of course, whatever you're mentally dealing with, you need other people to realize. One of my big corner points for this podcast is letting people know that they're not alone.
Yeah.
I literally just did an episode where I talked about my GI issues in depth, and I was like, if one person identifies with this, that's great, because you're not alone. That's the thing.
No, it's one of the things that some people don't like to talk about their recovery openly as I do. But I've had enough people, come up to me or
Yeah.
come to me off to the side and say, hey,
Yeah.
I've been battling this. Can you help me with it? People that I would never guess. I mean, people within this community, people of
Oh my
high
God,
levels,
yeah.
people of high level in this community.
Oh, definitely.
It's just not that I would ever out anybody. It's nothing against them. It's like I've seen people that I've been to AA meetings where on one side of me is a multimillionaire business owner, and on the next to me is somebody that
Unhomed or whatever.
literally just probably crawled off a bar stool 2 days before, and those people can talk like they've known each other for years, because it's one of the few places where you can talk on the same level. It doesn't, and I've seen it within my own family. It doesn't matter how many what your education level is. It doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't
Addiction
matter.
doesn't discriminate.
It doesn't matter on your family background. I come from a long line of alcoholism and drug addiction on all sides of my family, but I've also seen people in the same situation that have no issues. So it's environment. It's it's how you approach things. You know what I mean? I think back, I can tell you the early parts of my life where if I had made a couple of small changes, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
it's about connection too, like you mentioned. It's about connecting with other people, and again, like realizing that you're not alone and that you can find help. And it might not be like the easiest path, but if you are looking for help, you can find it. And like I definitely identify with you too, because again, like I'm much more vocal with all my health conditions than a lot of other people are. And like even a couple years back, I got like finally diagnosed with dyslexia. The number of people who came up to me, because I put it out on social media, like I'm not ashamed of it. I know I've been dealing with this my whole life. It's not a freaking mystery. I just got the formal diagnosis. But just the number of people who like I would have never guessed like came up to me and either shared a story about themselves or a close family member and just like really confided in me a feeling that I could tell that they held inside for years, possibly, if not like tens of years. They just like were able to feel a sense of relief because they finally saw someone else who they were like, wow, I understand where the feeling inside of me is coming from and that feeling inside of them is coming from, and I'm not alone. And that sense of not being alone is super important. So
no, I've had people say to me, it's they jokingly say it, but it's the truth. It's like they look at you like, well, if you did it, I can do it.
That's what I tell people all the time. I got nothing. It's like if you put me down on paper, Matt, there is absolutely freaking nothing that says I should be able to run at all. And then here I come winning an ultra marathon on Saturday.
Absolutely, so, that's a significant. I know. I'm proud of you. That's all. That's a significant win.
Well, if I can do anything like that's even remotely close to that, don't tell me you can't walk down the street. Like, come on. And I mean, same for you too. Like, I feel like if we put like your stats on paper, no one would be like, oh no, this guy runs like Ragnar's and like all these other like ultra distances, and they'd be like, the paper definition and the paper layout doesn't work out for what the reality of the situation is.
Oh no, I mean, you look at I shouldn't, just some of the stuff I've gone through in my life, I shouldn't be able to do it. But it's just it's a matter of and sometimes I question whether I should be doing it. But it's like at the same time, I've learned it's like if you do the proper training, what I mean, it's a lot of it. I always push back on it. It's like it's just the amount of proper training, and it's the whole thing. It's a diet, it's the mindset, it's everything.
Yeah, it's the people you surround yourself with, big time.
Yes,
too.
The old saying, it's like you are who you surround yourself with. So if you surround yourself with, people that have achieved these types of races, you're gonna achieve them. You surround yourself with people that, can't do a 5K. You're not gonna be able to do a 5K.
Yeah, you have to find people who are positively pushing you, positively impacting you, and being there to stand behind you when you have a goal that's like a little bit high reaching, but totally are like, you got this.
100%. Yeah. The local running community is huge like that. It's like they're so positive. Yeah. It's so uplifting. I know I haven't run like in a week or so only because I've been trying to rest my leg, and I'm getting texts. I'm getting texts from people saying, hey, because I'm missing running clubs, and it's running. It's like, hey, you okay? Everything good? You know what I mean? But they're also checking to make sure I'm running. But they also know it's like, hey, you good? In the aspect of
they know you.
You having any issues or anything? Everything going okay? You know what I mean? and we do it for each other. If somebody doesn't show up for a week or so, it's like, hey, have you seen so-and-so? And you start asking between each other, and then, and then you start texting. It's, are you good? And it's, and sometimes you don't get that text back. So you instead of the text, you go into their house and you're going to check on them. It's just, a lot of, veteran communities like that around here, the sober communities like that around here. It's just,
the single people community like that is kind of
that's a whole nother ball of wax.
Just this, it breeds a level of safety for your mental and your physical health if you have like regularly people to check in with and who are assuming that you're going to come and be part of whatever community thing that you're regularly a part of, like the run or whatever it is. So it definitely. We're very lucky to have the running community that we have here, just how supportive everyone is and how, I would say, largely inclusive the community is, both within like who you are and also like the distances and types of races that are run, which is great.
I think when I started getting sober, I noticed that the real huge correlation between the sober community and the running community, as far as like you just said, inclusiveness, it's such a huge, diverse group of people that you look around it and I can speak for myself saying that prior to getting sober I wouldn't have been around half of those people just because just my mindset beforehand.
Same.
But you start talking to these people, you get to know people, and you get a different outlook from people, and it's like a lot of things that start making sense that didn't make sense to you before. And it's
you meet people and you connect on a human level that you would never have done if you hadn't been part of that specific community.
And it becomes a huge support system for you. It really does.
Definitely.
It really does. So.
All my best friends run in some capacity, or my best friend Jeff has started running because I was running. Like I don't push running on people.
I don't either.
Contrary to popular belief, which I don't know if there is popular belief about this. I don't generally push people into running. Like I'll convince, like if you told me like, hey, I want to run this race, I'd be like, great, and I'll encourage you and everything. But like I'm just out here doing my thing. If you decide you want to join me, more power to you. I'd love to go running with you. Yeah. Like I'll take you if you're like, Julian, I want to train for a 5K. I'd be like, great. Where would you like me to be? I'd love to do some training runs with you. Like let's have a nice time. Like let me send you the Couch to 5K app so you can get like that good walk run plan going. But like it's just like being there for people is really big too.
Yeah.
Just and being accessible and making not only like running accessible but sobriety accessible and all these resources you guys have around some kind of either like healing initially or healing in the long term accessible, because it's as you know, like your mental health is never something that is just like tied up in a pretty bow and like, okay, I fixed it. That's the end. It's a constant wheel that you're just always on, and you have to keep that wheel moving, and it's better to keep it moving forward than backwards.
Yeah, it's keeping that wheel balanced is the biggest thing.
You want to keep it straight, and you want to keep it at least, even if it's just at a crawl, moving at a positive in a positive direction.
Yeah, exactly. This speed and what you're going to, because things happen within life. It's going to speed up or slow down, but to me personally, it's the balance of everything that's got to be there, because disrupt that balance, and it can go sideways real fast. So
one step in the right direction is one step in the right direction.
Absolutely.
That's how I look at it.
Just like a race, it's as long as you're moving forward.
Forward is a speed.
Yes, it is. So.
Which I'm sure you've learned at the ragdown. I've learned with ultra training too. It's like, yes, forward is a speed. Thank you so much for asking. It's speed.
Yes, I'm going uphill and I'm walking, but I'm moving forward.
I am going forward. I'm going forward at a very slow pace, but it is a forward direction. So. But okay, well that was great,
Alrighty.
Matt.
Thanks
you for coming on.
Appreciate it.
Happy to have you here, and thank you everyone for watching and listening today. And definitely go check out Ruck for Hitting Heroes in Transition if you haven't already. And definitely go ahead and like and subscribe if you are watching on YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe to the podcast if you are on Spotify or any other podcasting platform. And don't forget to leave us a 5-star review, because you should, because this has been a nice time. But we will see you next time on the next episode of Runnah. Goodbye, friends. Goodbye. That was great, Matt.
Thanks.
You did a nice job.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Killed it. Thank you for listening to this episode of Runnah. This podcast is edited, hosted, and produced by me, Juliana Coughlin. Brought to you in part by the Falmouth Running Club and the Falmouth Community TV station. If you'd like to connect with us, you can find us on Instagram and on TikTok at RunnahPod. And you can send us an email at runnahpod@gmail.com. And our original theme music was brought to you by the one and the only wonderful Jeffrey Hutton. and keep up the great work. I'm proud of you.